The night sky above Earth was quiet, but in the command halls buried deep under stone and steel, silence shattered in an instant. A sound cut through the static of space, sharp, desperate, and loud enough to make every operator freeze. Screens lit up red. Alarms rang. The message was not coded, it was raw. It was a cry for survival. The signal came in waves, each one filled with terror. Entire fleets destroyed, colonies falling into fire, billions screaming for help across the void. A voice broke through the static, not mechanical but alive. It was the voice of another species, alien, frightened, broken. For 5 long minutes, the message played without pause. Men and women in Earth's Defense Command listened as the aliens begged. Their words shook with panic. They named worlds that had already fallen. They named enemies that spread across systems like a storm. They begged Earth to answer before it was too late. No one moved. No one spoke. The room was heavy with the weight of decision. Humanity had waited centuries to hear something like this. They had always believed that the day would come when another voice out there would finally call to them. Yet no one expected that the first message across the stars would be drenched in fear. General Marcus Hale stood at the center of the chamber, his hands tightened on the railing before him. His grey eyes stared at the screen as the message repeated. Again, the words struck him like a blade. These were not just aliens asking for help. These were worlds collapsing. These were lives being hunted to extinction. The council members gathered, their faces pale. Some whispered that it was a trap. Some argued that Earth was not ready. Others muttered that the message should be ignored. But none of them could shake the sound of that cry. It clawed into their thoughts and refused to leave. The signal played once more. The voice screamed until it cracked. Then silence followed. For the first time, the chamber felt colder than space itself. General Hale spoke at last. His voice was calm but heavy with iron. We cannot unhear this. The galaxy has called us. The question is not if we answer, but how. The council erupted. Politicians shouted, scientists shook their heads, strategists slammed their hands against the table. To step into this war would be to reveal Earth's power to the universe. To step back would mean watching entire civilizations vanish while humanity hid behind its skies. But beneath their words, one truth lingered. Earth was not as helpless as the galaxy believed. For decades, Earth had built its fleets in silence. Officially, humanity had advanced defense ships, enough to guard its skies. Unofficially, hidden beneath mountains and oceans, Earth had created something far more dangerous. It was not an army for peace. It was not an army for defense. It was a force born in secret wars, sharpened in shadows, and locked away because it was too ruthless to ever release. The Legion. Every member of the council knew the name, though no one dared speak it out loud. The Legion was not made of ordinary soldiers. They were the survivors of Earth's darkest battles. They had been trained in ways that broke weaker men. They had been hardened until mercy was burned out of them. They were humanity's blade, forged for war and hidden from the light of peace. And now, as the alien cries echoed across the stars, that blade was the only answer Earth had. In the hours that followed, debate turned into fear. Reports confirmed that the message was genuine. Telescopes caught sight of burning colonies. Scattered transmissions across the void spoke of one name for the enemy, the Keth. No one had seen them. No image came through, but their presence was clear. Worlds fell within hours. Fleets disappeared like ash on the wind. The aliens who begged Earth were not strong. They had been proud once, but their armies were shattered. They wanted salvation. They wanted heroes. What they would receive instead was something else entirely. The next morning, the orders were signed. Deep under the Siberian ice, bunkers older than most cities groaned as their gates opened. Steam hissed through frozen air. Heavy doors sealed. for generations cracked apart with thunder, and from the shadows within, footsteps echoed, men and women walked forward. Their eyes did not shine with hope. Their faces carried no smiles. They were carved from stone and iron. Their bodies moved with the weight of purpose. These were not soldiers trained for mercy. They were warriors trained for victory alone. The Legion was awake. Around the world, whispers spread. Families who had never heard of the Legion saw armored transports crossing the skies. Nations that had sworn never to fight again watched fleets rise from hidden docks. Civilians looked to the heavens and asked why their world was preparing for war. But the truth was hidden. Only those within the council chambers knew what had begun. Only they knew that Earth had chosen to answer the cry. And only they knew that the answer would not be gentle. On the command deck of the Legion's carrier, Commander Rourke watched his warriors assemble. He was tall, scarred, his voice sharp as steel. Around him, the warriors of Earth stood silent, their armor black as midnight. He spoke only once. The galaxy begged. We heard, and now we go. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. No one cheered. No one smiled. The Legion did not fight for glory. They fought because they were told to. They fought because humanity demanded it. The carrier rose into the sky, its engines burning like suns. One by one, ships followed, climbing through the atmosphere until the blue of Earth gave way to the black of space. Stars glittered around them, cold and sharp. Behind, Earth grew smaller. Ahead, the war waited. The signal that had cried across the stars was no longer just a message. It was a summons. It had called to Earth. And Earth had answered with its most ruthless creation. As the fleet cut into the dark, one truth burned brighter than any star. The galaxy wanted saviors. What it would receive was something far more terrifying. Humanity was coming, and humanity was not merciful. The silence inside the Siberian bunker was broken by a deep metallic roar. Gears turned, steel, doors shuddered. Locks that had held for half a century tore apart as if the Earth itself was opening its mouth. Floodlights cut across the darkness, and a wall of frozen air rushed into the chamber. Inside the bunker, row upon row of black-armored soldiers stood still, locked in their chambers like statues. For decades they had slept. For decades they had been hidden, sealed away from the world above. Now, with the sound of alarms echoing across the underground vault, their eyes opened one by one. They did not blink. They did not breathe heavily. Their bodies moved as if they had never been asleep. The Legion was awake. General Marcus Hale watched from the command platform above. He had seen soldiers before. He had fought wars with men and women who bled and broke. But the Legion was different. Their faces were like stone. Their eyes looked through walls, cold and sharp. They were not shaped by peace. They were carved by fire and by pain. The first of them stepped forward. His armor clanked against the floor, heavy but precise. He did not look up, he did not look around, he waited. The second followed, then the third, until hundreds filled the chamber, shoulder to shoulder. The air was thick with silence. Commander Rourke entered. His presence cut through the room like a blade. His body carried scars that told stories of battles no one else survived. His voice was low, but it carried weight that shook the hall. "You have been called," he said. "The galaxy begs for help. Earth has answered. We are the answer." The Legion did not shout. They did not cheer. They bowed their heads once, united in a single motion, and the sound of their armor scraping together echoed like thunder. Outside the bunker, fleets of carriers rumbled through the skies. Civilians across continents looked up in confusion as dark ships broke through the clouds. Parents pointed to the heavens. Children whispered. People asked their leaders what was happening, but the truth was locked behind silence. The world above could not know the Legion had returned. If the public understood what the Legion truly was, they would not feel pride. They would feel fear, because the Legion was not trained to be heroes. They were trained to be predators. In the War Council chambers, screens flickered with images of burning worlds. The alien message continued to repeat, though now Earth had already answered it. The politicians still argued. Some demanded that the Legion be recalled. Others warned that unleashing them would poison humanity's reputation forever. But General Hale knew the choice was no longer theirs. The carriers were already lifting. The Legion was already awake. "Once they are unleashed," Hale said quietly, "they cannot be stopped." Aboard the flagship Iron Rain, the Legion prepared. Their armor was not polished silver. It was black, scarred, dented, yet unbreakable. Each warrior carried weapons that looked heavy enough to crush bone, yet they held them with ease. Commander Rourke walked the decks, his boots echoing against steel. He stopped before his soldiers. "You are not here to protect," he said. "You are not here to comfort. You are here to destroy. You are here to end what threatens humanity, no matter what stands in your way. The galaxy asked for help. It will not like the answer." The soldiers nodded once. Their silence was more powerful than 1,000 cheers. The first jump into deep space began. The Iron Rain and its escort ships ignited engines bright as suns. The stars stretched across the black. The fleet tore through space, leaving Earth behind. The moment the jump ended, the Legion saw the truth with their own eyes. Before them hung a broken planet. Flames burned across its surface. Ships floated in shattered pieces. Whole cities were gone, erased in clouds of smoke and ash. The cries from the message were not lies. This was what the enemy had done. The Keth had left. Nothing but ruin. The fleet did not slow. Commander Rourke gave the order. Dropships detached from the carriers, black arrows cutting through space toward the planet below. The Legion prepared as the atmosphere shook their ships. Their faces did not change. They strapped into their seats as fire streaked across their viewports. The first warrior to land was Sergeant Cale. His boots struck the ground with a sound like thunder. Around him, the ruins of a once great city smoldered. Buildings leaned, half destroyed. The sky was black with smoke. He raised his weapon and scanned the shadows. Behind him, more dropships struck the ground. Legion soldiers poured out, forming lines with perfect discipline. Not one shouted, not one hesitated. They moved like a machine, each step part of something larger than themselves. The survivors appeared from the ruins, thin figures. Their skin, pale and cracked, stumbled forward. Their eyes were wide with fear. They were the aliens who had sent the signal. They had expected saviors. They had expected kindness. What they saw instead was a wall of armored soldiers, silent and cold. One alien fell to its knees, clutching at Cale's armor. Its voice broke as it begged for help. Cale did not move. He did not bend. He signaled instead for medics to drag the alien away. The survivors whispered among themselves. Some looked at the Legion with hope, others with terror. Because the moment the Legion arrived, they brought with them a shadow deeper than the fire that had already consumed the planet. From the distance came a sound. It was not a cry. It was not a plea. It was a roar. The Keth had returned. Shadows moved across the burning streets. Shapes, tall and jagged, walked through the smoke. Their eyes glowed like fire. Their voices were screams twisted into words no human ear could understand. The Legion did not wait. "Advance," Commander Rourke ordered. The first line of warriors raised their weapons. The sound of gunfire ripped through the air. The Keth charged. The ground shook beneath their steps. The two forces collided. The battle that followed was not clean. It was not glorious. The Keth fought like beasts, claws tearing through steel. But the Legion fought with precision. Every strike was planned. Every shot was placed to kill. Sergeant Kyle tore through 3 Keth in seconds, his blade carving deep. Blood hissed against the ground. Another soldier dragged a Keth to the floor and crushed its chest with a single strike. The survivors watched from the ruins. Their cries mixed with the thunder of battle. They had begged for help. They had received something else. They had received Earth's most ruthless warriors. Hours later, silence fell again. The streets were filled with smoke. The ground was painted with ash and blood. The Keth were broken, their bodies scattered. The Legion stood in lines, weapons lowered but not released. The survivors crept forward. Their eyes searched for kindness, but the Legion gave none. They had won the battle, yet their faces did not change. There was no victory in them. There was only the readiness to fight again. Commander Rourke spoke once more. His words were not for the survivors. They were for his warriors. This is only the beginning, he said. The Keth will come again, and when they do, we will show them that humanity does not know mercy. We only know victory. The survivors bowed their heads, some in gratitude, some in fear. The Legion turned to the horizon. The ruthless ones had awakened, and the galaxy would never sleep again. The sky above the ruined planet cracked with fire. From the black clouds, ships descended, their engines screaming as they cut through smoke and ash. The survivors hiding in the shattered city looked up in terror. They knew that sound. The Keth were coming back. The Legion stood ready. Their black armor reflected the glow of flames as Commander Rourke raised his hand. His voice was sharp, cutting through the roar above. Hold positions, no retreat. The ground shook as the Keth ships landed beyond the ruins. The enemy poured out in waves. Their bodies were tall, twisted, armored in jagged plates. Their eyes burned like molten fire. Their roars shook the air as they charged through the rubble. The survivors screamed. Families clutched one another, expecting slaughter. They had prayed for heroes. What they saw instead were Earth's deadliest warriors stepping forward into the storm. The hook came with the first clash. Sergeant Kyle led the front line. His blade gleamed black in the firelight. He moved faster than the eye could follow. The first Keth leapt toward him, claws raised high. Kyle struck once, clean and final. The alien's body fell before it hit the ground. All around him, the Legion erupted into motion. Soldiers fired in perfect rhythm. Bullets cracked through. The smoke, striking enemy skulls with precise force. Rockets tore into the second wave, throwing bodies across the ruins. But the Keth were not like any enemy Earth had faced before. They did not break when their first line fell. They did not retreat. They rushed forward, screaming louder. Their claws tearing through stone as if it were paper. One Keth slammed into a Legionnaire, knocking him against the wreckage of a building. The alien raised its claws to strike again. In a blur, another Legion soldier appeared, blades slicing through its chest in one motion. The warrior dragged his comrade back to his feet without a word, and they fought on. From the rooftops, survivors watched in horror and awe. The Legion fought like a machine. They did not stumble. They did not shout. Every movement was exact. Where the Keth charged with rage, humanity struck with ruthless calm. Still, the battle was not easy. The Keth kept coming. Their numbers seemed endless. For every one that fell, two more pushed through the smoke. The streets became rivers of fire and blood. Commander Rourke moved among his soldiers, his voice steady. Tighten lines, push forward. The Legion obeyed. Step by step they advanced through the ruined city, cutting deeper into the Keth swarm. The ground beneath them shook with every impact. The sky rumbled with explosions, yet the line of black armor never bent. Kyle struck again and again, his blade singing through the air. A claw grazed his shoulder, tearing metal, but he did not slow. He shoved the Keth back with brutal force and ended it with one thrust. Around him, his brothers and sisters in the Legion fought the same way. They were not men and women anymore. They were predators moving as one. For the survivors, it was both salvation and nightmare. The aliens who had begged Earth for help whispered to each other in fear. These humans were not saviors. They were something far colder, Hours passed, though in battle it felt like moments. By the time the last kith fell, the city was silent again. Smoke drifted over broken towers. The ground was littered with bodies, human and alien alike. The Legion stood in formation, weapons ready, waiting for another wave. None came. Commander Rourke scanned the battlefield. His eyes narrowed. This was only a test. The Keith wanted to see us bleed. He was right. Even in defeat, the enemy's roars had carried no fear. They had charged to measure humanity's strength. They had fallen, but they had learned. The survivors crept from hiding, their faces pale, their bodies trembling. They moved toward the Bay Legion as if approaching wild beasts. Some tried to thank them. Others kept their distance, whispering that these humans were not saviors, but executioners. Kyle removed his helmet. His scarred face was expressionless as he looked down at the small alien child clinging to its mother's hand. The child's wide eyes held both gratitude and terror. Kyle turned away, unable to answer either emotion. In the command tent set, up among the ruins, the council connected through secure transmission. General Hale's face flickered across the screen. His voice was calm but grim. "You've drawn blood, Commander. What do you see?" Rourke's reply was sharp. "I see an enemy that learns quickly. I see survivors who do not understand what we are, and I see a war that will not end here." The general nodded slowly. "Then you know what comes next." Rourke's jaw tightened. "Yes, first blood has been drawn, but this is only the beginning." That night, the survivors tried to rebuild small fires in the ruins. They whispered prayers, songs, fragments of hope, yet their eyes never stopped, drifting toward the black silhouettes of the Legion, standing guard among the shadows. The Keth would come again. The survivors knew it. The Legion knew it. The first contact between Earth's deadliest warriors and the galaxy's greatest threat had been written in fire and blood, and the war had only begun. The city still burned. Towers leaned like broken bones against the dark sky. Smoke drifted over streets painted with ash and blood. The Keith were gone for now, but their shadow still lay heavy on the ruins. In the silence that followed the battle, a single sound rose. It was soft, trembling, yet sharp enough to cut. Through the night, a child's cry. The Legion turned. Black armor reflected the firelight as Sergeant Cale moved first. His boots struck the ground with heavy steps. Between the rubble, a small alien child stumbled forward, clothes torn, face streaked with ash. The child raised thin arms toward the soldiers, begging for help. For a long moment, no one moved. The Legion was trained to face armies, not children. Their orders were simple: destroy the enemy, hold the line, leave nothing standing that could strike back. Mercy had never been written into their code. Yet here in the ruins, the galaxy tested them with something far more dangerous than claws or fire. It tested them with innocence. Commander Rourke stood still. His cold eyes studied the child as if weighing a weapon. Around him, his soldiers waited for his word. The survivors hidden among the ruins watched too. Their voices whispered in fear. Would these humans, these ruthless warriors, show mercy, or would they prove once and for all that they were nothing but predators in black armor? Cale knelt. His hand, heavy with steel, reached out. The child flinched but did not run. Slowly, Kyle lifted the child into his arms. The survivors gasped. For the first time since the Legion had landed, humanity showed something other than cold precision. But mercy had a price. From the shadows beyond the ruined streets came a roar. The sound shook the air like thunder. The Keth had returned. Dozens burst from the darkness, their eyes glowing with savage light. They charged faster than before, roaring louder, as if enraged by the single act of kindness they had just witnessed. Kyle handed the child to a medic. "Take them to the rear!" Then he turned back to the street, blade ready, and stood shoulder to shoulder with his brothers. The battle was chaos. The Keth fought with a fury unlike anything seen before. Their claws slashed through stone, their bodies slammed into walls, shattering them like glass. But the Legion did not break. Every strike they made was calculated. Every movement was cold, exact, merciless. Still, something had changed. The survivors saw it in the way the soldiers moved. They fought harder now, not only to win, but to protect. The child's cry had cut, deeper than any claw. Mercy had awakened something buried beneath their steel. Commander Rourke noticed it too. His sharp eyes swept the battlefield. He saw Kale push forward with savage strikes, driving back wave after wave. He saw others shielding survivors, pulling them away from falling rubble, even as bullets screamed past their heads. It was effective. The Keth fell in greater numbers than before, but Rourke's jaw tightened. This was not the Legion he had trained. Mercy made them stronger now, but later it could make them weak. The fight ended as suddenly as it began. The last Keth fell, with a broken roar. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of flames. The Legion stood among the bodies, weapons dripping with ash and blood. The survivors crept forward. They stared at the soldiers who had not only killed the enemy, but had also saved their children, their wounded, their helpless. Some fell to their knees in gratitude. Others whispered in awe. For the first time, the survivors did not see predators. They saw something closer to guardians. In the command tent, tension burned. General Hale's face flickered on the screen once more. He had watched the entire battle. Through feeds, his voice was low and heavy. "You broke protocol," he said to Rourke. Rourke did not flinch. "We held the line. The Keth are dead." "You showed mercy," Hale replied. "That was not the Legion's design." Rourke's gaze hardened. "Mercy is not weakness if it helps us win. The Keth wanted us to be monsters. Today we proved we are more than that." The general's silence stretched across the line. "At last," he spoke. "Be careful, Commander. The galaxy watches. Every act shapes how they see us. And mercy can cost more than you think." The screen went dark. That night Kyle sat among his squad in silence. The alien child he had carried earlier slept beside the survivors, safe under the care of medics. His soldiers glanced at him, but said nothing. Finally, one spoke. "We are not meant to save them. We are meant to win." Kyle's voice was quiet, but steady. "What is victory worth if no one is left to see it?" The words hung heavy in the air. At dawn, the survivors gathered. They brought food, water, and small tokens of thanks to the Legion. Some knelt. Others touched the soldiers' armor as if it were holy. But among the survivors, whispers also grew. If the humans could show mercy, perhaps they could be trusted. Perhaps they were more than the galaxy's new predators. The Legion did not answer those whispers. They stood silent, as always. Yet inside their armor, some felt the weight of Kale's words. That day, scouts returned with grim news. The Keth were not retreating. They were gathering in numbers far greater than before. Their next assault would be larger, stronger, and merciless. "Commander," Rourke ordered defenses built. The survivors worked alongside the Legion, carrying stone and metal, shaping barricades under the soldiers' watch. For the first time, humans and aliens labored side by side, but in the back of Rourke's mind, the question burned. Had mercy made them stronger, or had it given the enemy something to exploit? Night fell once again. Fires burned across the ruins. The child Kale had saved woke crying, and this time, several Legion soldiers turned their heads toward the sound. The cost of mercy had not yet been paid, but soon the galaxy would demand its price. The ruins shook before dawn, not from fire, not from storms, but from the ground itself tearing apart. The survivors woke to the sound of stone cracking, metal falling, and a deep roar that carried across the city like thunder. The Legion was already moving. Commander Rourke stood on the broken wall of a tower, his black armor glowing faintly in the red light of burning skies. His sharp eyes scanned the horizon, and then he saw it. The Keth were coming. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. Their ships blotted out the clouds, descending in a storm of fire. Their armies marched across the plains, dark shapes that moved like an endless tide. The ground shook with every step. The sky itself seemed to break beneath their numbers. This was not a raid, this was not a test. This was vengeance. The enemy had come to erase the Legion from the galaxy. Positions, Rourke ordered. His voice was calm, but every soldier knew the truth. This battle would not be like the others. Sergeant Cale stood at the front, his blade strapped across his back. Around him, legionnaires readied weapons, their black armor forming a wall of steel and fire. Behind them, survivors huddled together, their faces pale with terror. The child Cale had saved clung to its mother's hand, eyes wide as the roar of the Keth armies grew louder. "Steady," Cale said, his voice low. The first wave came like lightning. Keth warships opened fire, their blasts tearing through the ruins. Towers collapsed, streets cracked open, flames erupted across the battlefield. Then, with a scream that shook the air, the Keth charged. The clash was thunder. The Legion unleashed fire. Rifles spat streams of steel. Rockets lit the sky. Entire. Squads of Keth fell in the opening barrage, bodies collapsing into dust. But for every one that died, 10 more surged forward. Kyle leapt into the front line. His blade cut through flesh and armor alike. Sparks and blood sprayed across the rubble. He did not hesitate. He did not falter. He moved like a storm given form. The Keth struck back with savage fury. Claws ripped into barricades, bodies slammed against shields. The sound of metal and bone breaking filled the streets. The survivors screamed, but the Legion never bent. They fought shoulder to shoulder, their black armor unbroken, their weapons never silent. Above, the sky exploded. Keth fighters rained fire across the city, targeting the survivors as much as the soldiers. "Defensive wings, up!" Rourke commanded. Legion ships rose from hidden hangars, engines screaming as they cut into the enemy swarm. Dogfights erupted. In the clouds, trails of fire streaked through the sky as ships tore each other apart. The city became a battlefield on 2 fronts, air and ground, both burning. Kyle fought through the smoke. His blade struck one enemy down, then another, then another. His armor was dented, scarred, bleeding sparks, but he did not stop. Then he heard it. A scream not from a soldier but from behind him. A wall had collapsed. Survivors were trapped. Flames surged closer. Kyle turned. His orders said fight. His orders said ignore the weak, but his heart moved faster than his orders. He broke formation, cutting a path through the Keth toward the survivors. "Kyle!" A soldier shouted, but he did not stop. He reached the trapped family, tearing rubble apart with bare hands. He lifted the child free and shoved the family behind the Legion's line. Then he turned, blade raised, as Keth swarmed around him. He fought alone. Commander Rourke saw it. His jaw tightened. Kyle was breaking discipline again. Mercy was slowing him, dragging him into risks the Legion was not designed to take. But Rourke also saw the survivors still alive because of him. Rourke raised his rifle and fired into the swarm, covering Kale until he rejoined the line. The commander said nothing. The battlefield was not the place for lectures, but the thought burned in his mind. Mercy had a cost, and soon it would demand more than one life. The battle dragged on for hours. The Legion killed thousands, yet the Keth kept coming. The streets were rivers of blood. Buildings collapsed into mountains of rubble. Smoke rose into the heavens like black pillars. At last, the second wave broke. The Keth pulled back, dragging their dead with them. The ground was silent, except for the crackle of fire and the groans of the wounded. The Legion stood in formation, weapons ready, waiting for the next strike. It came sooner than expected. The earth split. From below the city, tunnels cracked open. The Keth had not only attacked from the sky and the plains, They had dug beneath. Monstrous war beasts crawled from the ground, armored in spikes, each one carrying dozens of Keth on its back. Their roars shook the ruins like earthquakes. The survivors collapsed in fear. Commander Rourke gave no speech. He only raised his hand. Forward! The Legion obeyed. The second clash was worse than the first. The war beasts charged through walls, tearing streets apart with their claws. The Legion leapt onto their backs, planting charges, driving blades through flesh. Explosions ripped through the monsters, but every victory cost blood. Kale fought on the back of one beast, his blade sinking deep into its neck. The monster roared, twisting, trying to throw him off. With a final strike, he split its throat and leapt free as it collapsed in a storm of fire. But even as the beast fell, two more took its place. Rourke called in air support. Bombers screamed overhead, dropping. Fire on the Keth lines. The ground shook with shockwaves. Entire squads of Keth vanished into ash. Still, the enemy pressed forward. By nightfall, the city was barely standing. Half its streets were rubble, half its towers gone. The survivors huddled behind the Legion, knowing that, without Earth's ruthless warriors, they would already be ash. But the Legion was bleeding, soldiers limped, armor was shattered, ammunition was running thin. The Keth had struck back harder than anyone expected, and Rourke knew this was only the beginning. As the fires burned into the night, Kale sat against the ruins, his blade resting across his knees. His armor was cracked, his hands were cut, his face was streaked with blood. The child he had saved earlier stared at him from the arms of its mother. Their eyes met. No words were spoken. None were needed. Kyle looked away. He knew what it meant. Mercy had kept the child alive, but mercy had also dragged him closer to death. The cost was rising, and the next time the Keth struck, the price might be more than anyone could pay. The fire still burned in the ruins when the betrayal began. The survivors gathered in silence, their faces pale in the glow of smoking towers. The Legion stood guard, armor cracked, weapons low on ammunition. The ground was littered with alien bodies, but everyone knew the Keth would return. Commander Rourke watched the horizon. His eyes were sharp, unblinking. He knew the enemy was regrouping. But when the next strike came, it would not be the only danger they faced, because inside the city, shadows had begun to move. Not all the survivors trusted Earth's warriors. Some had seen the Legion's cold brutality and whispered that the humans were worse than the Keth. They whispered louder each night, and fear turned into anger. It was not the Keth who struck first. It was those who had begged Earth for help. The first sign came at dawn. A soldier failed to report in, then another. By the time the third vanished, Rourke called an immediate sweep. Legion squads searched the ruins, scanning for bodies, tracking heat signatures. They found nothing. When Kale returned from patrol, he spoke quietly. "They're not dead. They've been taken." Rourke's jaw tightened. Taken by who? Kale's. Eyes shifted toward the survivors, gathered in broken shelters. The civilians looked away when the Legion's black armor passed. Some held their children tighter. Others whispered into the smoke. The commander didn't need Kyle to answer. He already knew. Night fell heavy, black clouds covering the stars. Fires flickered in the ruins, and the wind carried the smell of blood and smoke. Then it happened. An explosion ripped through the Legion supply depot. Flames roared into the sky, ammunition and fuel bursting into fire. Alarms blared. Soldiers rushed to contain the inferno, but the damage was already done. Kale pulled survivors from the wreckage, his armor glowing red from the heat. He saw one figure running in the smoke, small, fast, not Keth. It was a survivor, and they carried Legion explosives. Kale caught them, slamming the figure against the wall. The mask fell away, revealing a gaunt alien face twisted with fear and rage. "They will kill us all," the alien hissed. "You are no saviors. You are executioners." Before Kale could answer, the alien bit down on a charge hidden in its mouth. The blast shook the ruins, tearing both the prisoner and part of the wall apart. Cale staggered back, blood spraying across his armor. The betrayal was no longer whispers, it was war. Rourke assembled the Legion. His voice was cold as steel. We fight one enemy, and now another rises in our shadow. They think they can weaken us before the Keth return. They think they can cut our throats while we guard their walls. We will not let them. The soldiers nodded in silence. None questioned the order, but Cale felt the weight in his chest. He had saved these people. He had bled for them. And now some of them struck from behind. He could not understand it, but he could not deny it. Mercy had saved lives, but mercy had also opened the door to betrayal. The next attack came swift and sharp. A squad patrolling the east ruins was ambushed. Explosives hidden beneath rubble tore the ground apart, swallowing 3 Legion soldiers. Survivors armed with stolen rifles fired from the shadows. The Legion responded with brutal precision. Return fire turned the ambush site into a graveyard, but when the smoke cleared, the bodies revealed the truth. These were not Keth. These were the very civilians they had been sent to protect. The city fell into chaos. Survivors accused each other. Some begged the Legion for protection. Others spit at their feet, and through it all, the Keth waited. In the command tent, Rourke stared at the tactical map. Cale stood beside him, silent until the tension broke. "They are afraid," Cale said. "They see monsters in us, but they do not see the monsters outside their walls." Rourke's eyes never left the map. "Fear makes people weak. Weakness makes them dangerous. We can't fight both the Keth and rebellion." "So what do we do?" Cale asked. The commander's voice was colder than the night air. "We make them choose." The next morning, Rourke called the survivors to the center of the ruins. The Legion stood around them, a wall of black steel. Rourke stepped forward, his face hidden beneath his helmet. His voice carried across the crowd. "You live because of us. You breathe because we fight. Yet some among you strike at us. That ends now. You will choose. Stand with Earth or stand against it. There will be no middle ground," the survivors murmured in fear. Families held hands. Some stepped forward, pledging loyalty. Others hung back, their eyes filled with hatred. Cale watched the faces. He saw the child he had saved, clutching its mother. They stepped forward, choosing Earth. But others, the same people he had once carried from rubble, turned away. Betrayal cut deeper than any blade. That night, Cale could not sleep. He sat alone in the ruins, blade across his knees, watching. The shadows move, a whisper carried through the wind. He turned sharply, weapon ready. A survivor stepped forward, hands raised, not armed, not hostile, just broken. "They took my brother," the alien whispered. "Not the Keth, our own people. They say the Legion will bring worse than death. They say you will enslave us once the Keth are gone." Cale's grip tightened. "And what do you believe?" The survivor looked at him with trembling eyes. "I don't know." Before Cale could answer, a sound split the air, a deep roar rolling like thunder across the plains. The Keth were coming back, and this time betrayal had already torn the city in two. The attack began with no warning. Keth artillery lit the horizon, shells screaming into the ruins. Explosions tore streets apart, flames leaping into the sky. The survivors scattered in panic, some rushing toward the Legion for protection, others vanishing into the shadows to join the rebels. The Legion held formation. Cale fought beside his brothers, blade flashing through fire. But for every Keth he cut down, another survivor's shot rang out from the shadows, aimed at the very soldiers who defended them. The battlefield was madness. Friend and foe blurred in the smoke. The Legion was caught between alien claws and traitors' bullets. Commander Rourke's voice thundered through the comms. "Hold the line. No retreat. Kill anything that threatens the formation." The order was clear. The Legion obeyed. Civilians who raised rifles were cut down without hesitation. Rebel cries were silenced in storms of fire, but Kyle hesitated. His blade paused when he saw familiar faces. Survivors he had once saved now raised weapons against him. He fought them only when forced. His strikes aimed to disable, not kill. It slowed him. It weakened him. And the Keth noticed. A monstrous warrior slammed into him, claws tearing into his armor. Kale dropped to one knee, blade locked against the alien's strength. His muscles screamed as the monster pressed him down. For a moment, it seemed he would fall. Then Rourke appeared, rifle fire blasting the Keth's skull apart. The alien collapsed, its body crushing the rubble. Rourke pulled Kyle to his feet, his voice sharp. "Mercy will kill you, soldier." Kyle's eyes burned. "And without mercy, what are we fighting for?" The commander did not answer. He turned. Back to the battle, his weapons spitting fire. The fight raged until dawn. By the time the last Keth withdrew, the ruins were soaked in blood. Bodies of enemy and traitor alike lay twisted in the streets. The survivors who remained loyal wept in silence. The rebels who survived vanished into the shadows, leaving their dead behind. The Legion stood in silence, black armor smeared with ash and blood. They had survived another night, but at what cost? When the smoke cleared, Rourke gave his report. To General Hale. His voice was steady, but his eyes were hard. The Keth strike harder each time. But the rebellion inside our walls is worse. We are fighting on two fronts, and both are killing us. The general's voice crackled through the comms. Then you know what must be done. Rourke gave a sharp nod. Yes. No more mercy. No. More hesitation. Kale stood in the shadows, listening. His chest tightened. He knew what those words meant. He knew what the Legion would do next, and he knew he would have to choose. The shadows of betrayal had grown too deep to ignore. The Keth were not the only enemy now. The war was no longer just survival. It was becoming something darker, and the true cost was only beginning to show. The city walls cracked under fire before sunrise. The roar of Keth artillery shook the ruins, each blast tearing streets apart and sending towers crashing into dust. The survivors screamed, running for shelter, but there was nowhere left to hide. Smoke choked the sky, and the earth itself trembled under the endless barrage. The Legion stood firm. Their black armor glowed. In the firelight, rifles locked, blades sharpened. Commander Rourke's voice cut through the thunder. "This is the line. We do not break." The soldiers answered in silence. Their discipline was absolute, but even steel can bend when struck too many times. The Keth were not only attacking with force, they were attacking with numbers beyond reason. And the Legion knew this battle would push them to their limit. It would be their breaking point. Sergeant Kale stood at the front, his blade strapped across his back, his body scarred from days of war. His eyes scanned the battlefield. He could see the enemy swarm rolling across the plains, black shapes in the firelight, tens of thousands moving as one tide. Beside him, the child he had once saved clung to its mother's arm, eyes wide with terror. The survivors looked at Kyle not as a man, but as a wall of flesh and steel holding back death itself. Kyle closed his eyes for a brief second. He had promised himself that mercy mattered, that saving lives meant more than killing enemies. But with every new attack, that promise felt heavier. The Keth were coming, and this time, mercy might get them all killed. The first wave hit like thunder. Keth war beasts stormed the ruins, armored hides glowing with heat, their claws smashing stone to dust. Legion rifles spat fire, cutting beasts down in storms of bullets. Explosions shook the ground as rockets struck their spines, sending fire and gore across the battlefield. Kyle leapt into the fray, his blade singing through the smoke. He struck with brutal precision, each swing cutting deep. Blood splattered across his armor, but he did not stop. Around him, legionnaires fought like a machine, their rifles fired in perfect rhythm, their movements exact. But the Keth did not. Fear death. They threw themselves against the wall of black armor again and again, claws tearing, teeth snapping, bodies piling into mountains of flesh. The survivors huddled behind broken walls, praying as the city became a slaughterhouse. Hours passed in fire and blood. The ground was slick, the air thick with smoke. For every enemy that fell, 2 more took its place. Then, in the chaos, betrayal struck again. From within the ruins, hidden charges exploded. Fire tore through a Legion flank, killing 3 soldiers instantly. From the shadows, rebels opened fire, their stolen rifles cutting into Earth's warriors. The Legion was caught between 2 enemies, Keth in the front, traitors in the back. Kyle spun, fury in his eyes. He saw a rebel squad raising rifles toward a group of civilians, trying to force them away from the Legion's protection. Without thinking, Kyle broke formation, cutting through the smoke toward them. His blade slashed once, twice, dropping. The rebels before they could fire. The civilians stared at him in shock. Their would-be killers were their own people. Kyle pulled them to safety, but when he turned back, he saw Commander Rourke watching him from across the battlefield. The commander's expression was unreadable behind his helmet, but Kyle knew the look, mercy again, disobedience again, and Rourke's patience was running out. By nightfall, the battlefield was silent. The Keth had withdrawn, leaving rivers of blood behind. The Legion stood in formation, bodies battered, weapons nearly dry. The rebels had vanished into the shadows, leaving only corpses and whispers of fear. In the command tent, Rourke stood. Over the tactical map, his voice was steel. "We are bleeding from 2 wounds. One is the Keth, the other festers inside these walls. If we do not cut it out, it will kill us faster than claws or fire." His officers nodded. None spoke against him. Kyle stood in silence, fists clenched. His chest burned with conflict. He knew what Rourke meant. The commander wanted to purge the rebellion completely. That meant no more hesitation, no more sparing, no more mercy. Kyle felt the weight of the choice pressing down. Was he a soldier, bound to orders, or was he something else, something that fought for more than survival? The breaking point came at dawn. The rebels made their move. Under cover of smoke, they struck the shelters where survivors slept. Explosions lit the sky. Screams ripped through the ruins. Dozens of civilians fell in the opening blast. Children cried, mothers wept, chaos spread like fire. The Legion rushed to respond, but the rebels fought with savage precision, fueled by desperation. They were not just survivors anymore. They were an army of their own, willing to destroy everything, to keep the Legion from ruling them. Rourke gave the order. His voice thundered through comms. Cut them down, all of them, no hesitation. The Legion moved like blades in the night. But Kyle froze. In the smoke, he saw faces he knew, survivors he had carried from rubble, a man who had once thanked him for saving his family, a woman who had shared her last water with soldiers. They now stood with rifles firing at the Legion. Kyle's chest ached. He raised his blade, but could not strike. The rebels pressed harder. One charged Kyle, rifle raised. Kyle knocked the weapon aside, slamming the rebel into the wall. The mask fell away, revealing the survivor who had once told him the Legion would enslave them. The man's eyes were wild with fear. "You will destroy us all. Better we die free than live under you." Kyle hesitated for a heartbeat too long. Another rebel struck from the side, blade cutting across his armor. Sparks burst. Blood sprayed. Kyle staggered, nearly falling. Then a shot rang out. The rebel fell, body crumpling. Rourke lowered his rifle, eyes burning. "You will get yourself killed," the commander growled, "and you will take the rest of us with you." Kyle's jaw tightened. "They are people, not enemies." Rourke's voice was cold. They made their choice. The battle raged until the last rebel was cut down. The survivors left alive wept in silence, too afraid to speak. When the smoke cleared, the ruins were a graveyard of both Keth and traitors. The ground was soaked, the air heavy with silence. The Legion gathered in formation, but their faces were grim. This was no victory. It was survival, bought at the price of trust. That night, Kyle stood alone at the edge of the ruins, staring at the stars. His armor was cracked, his blade heavy with blood. The child he had saved once before approached, eyes wide. "Why do they fight you? You save us." Kyle knelt, his voice soft. "Because fear can turn even friends into enemies." The child clung to his arm. "Will you leave us?" Kyle shook his head. "No, I will not leave you." But deep inside, he felt the truth clawing at him. The Legion was at its breaking point, and soon something would have to shatter. In the command tent, Rourke spoke with General Hale. "We are holding, but barely. The Keth will strike again, and when they do, we cannot fight if betrayal festers inside. The time for hesitation is over." The general's voice was cold. "Then break them, Commander. Break them all if you must." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "Yes, sir." Outside, Cale heard the words, his fists clenched, his heart pounded. The breaking point had come, and when it snapped, the galaxy would burn with it. The sky tore open at dawn. Keth warships filled the heavens, blotting out the sun with wings of fire. Their engines screamed like 1,000 storms, their shadows falling across the ruined city below. The survivors looked up and fell to their knees in despair. This was no raid, no test. This was the end. Commander Rourke stood on the shattered wall, his black armor scarred and blood-stained, his rifle gripped tight. His voice thundered across the Legion lines. "This is it. No retreat, no surrender. Today we hold or today we die." The soldiers answered in silence. They did not need words. They knew the truth. Earth's deadliest warriors had been sent to save the helpless. Instead, they had been dragged into a war with no mercy. And now, the final strike had come. Sergeant Cale stood at the front, his blade strapped across his back. His eyes scanned the battlefield. He saw Keth swarms pouring from the plains, war beasts charging, ships lowering to the ground, tens of thousands, maybe more. Beside him, the child he had once saved clung to its mother. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Kyle nodded once. A promise. He would fight until his last breath to keep them alive. The horn of war sounded from the Keth lines, a roar that shook the ruins, and then the world exploded. The first barrage struck like thunder. Keth artillery shattered towers, ripping the city apart piece by piece. Legion rifles spat fire in response, cutting into the enemy tide. Rockets streaked across the sky, detonating against war beasts and tearing them into flames and ash. Kyle leapt into the fray, blade flashing through smoke. He cut down one enemy, then another, his movements a storm of steel and blood. His armor cracked, sparks flew, but he never slowed. The Keth pressed harder, their endless tide smashing into the Legion line. Claws tore at shields, teeth ripped at armor, bodies slammed into bodies. The ground shook with every strike. The survivors screamed behind the Legion, but the soldiers never bent. Above, the battle was worse. Keth warships rained fire from the sky, burning streets and shelters. Legion fighters screamed upward to meet them. The heavens lit with fire as ships clashed, trails of smoke streaking across the clouds. Explosions lit the horizon. Burning wrecks fell like meteors into the city. The battlefield was no longer ground or sky. It was everywhere. Hours passed in blood and fire. For every Keth that fell, more surged forward. The Legion fought without pause, but exhaustion began to break them. Ammunition ran low. Armor shattered. Blood painted the rubble. Then came the second strike. From beneath the earth, tunnels split open. Keth war machines crawled out, massive and armored, their bodies bristling with cannons. They opened fire, tearing entire blocks into rubble. The Legion reeled, the line bent, and for the first time Rourke felt doubt. "Fall back to the inner wall," he ordered. His voice was steady, but his chest ached. He had never given that order before. The Legion obeyed, step by step, retreating through the ruins. They fought as they moved, covering one another, dragging the wounded. The Keth roared with triumph, pressing harder, their claws tearing into the retreating line. Kyle fought at the rear, blade cutting furiously to keep the enemy back. His breath burned, his muscles screamed, but he did not falter. Then he saw it. The child and the mother caught in the chaos, trapped behind falling rubble. The Keth swarmed toward them. Kyle broke formation again. He cut through the tide, reached them, lifted them into his arms, and carried them through the fire. Blasts tore across his back, claws raked against his armor, but he did not stop until they were behind the line. When he turned back, Rourke was watching. This time, the commander did not speak. He only gave a short nod. Mercy had a place after. All night fell. The battlefield glowed with fire. The Legion stood at the last wall, the final line of defense. Behind them, survivors huddled together, whispering prayers. Before them, the Keth swarmed in numbers too great to count. Rourke raised his rifle. His voice carried across the ruins. "This is the last stand of Earth's Legion. We fight until nothing is left." Kyle raised his blade. The soldiers lifted their rifles, and the Keth charged. The clash was fury. War beasts smashed into walls. Legion rifles tore into their hides, explosions ripping them apart. Kyle leapt from the barricade, his blade carving through the enemy swarm. He fought like a storm given flesh, his movements endless, his strikes final. Rourke fired with perfect precision, each shot dropping an enemy soldier. His voice roared over comms, guiding his men, steadying their line. The survivors screamed as the Keth broke through the first barricade. The Legion met them hand to hand, blades against claws, steel against fire. The city became a slaughterhouse. One by one, legionnaires fell. Bodies of Earth's finest warriors littered the ruins, but the line never broke. For every soldier that fell, another stepped into their place. Kale fought until his armor was shredded, his blood dripping into the dust. Yet he did not stop. He could not stop. The child's face burned in his mind, a reminder of why he fought. Then came the final beast, a Keth warlord taller than any Kyle had ever seen, armored in bone and fire, wielding claws that glowed red with heat. It roared, shaking the ruins, and charged straight for the Legion line. Kyle stepped forward. The clash was thunder, blade against claw, strike against strike. The warlord's strength was monstrous. It slammed Kale into the rubble, claws tearing. Through his armor, blood sprayed across the battlefield, but Kyle rose again. He roared, driving his blade into the warlord's chest. The beast howled, claws slashing across Kyle's side, tearing him open. Pain burned, but Kyle did not stop. With one final strike, he drove his blade through the warlord's skull. The monster fell, its body shaking the ground. Kale dropped to his knees, blood pouring from his wounds. The battlefield was silent for one breath. Then the Keth began to fall. Back! The swarm retreated, dragging their dead, their roars fading into the night. For the first time, they had been broken. The Legion had held. The survivors crawled from hiding, their eyes wide with disbelief. They saw the black-armored warriors standing among mountains of bodies, blood dripping from every blade, smoke rising from every rifle. They had witnessed the last stand of Earth's Legion, but it was not victory. The Legion was broken, half there. Soldiers were dead. The city was ash. The survivors were scarred beyond repair. Kyle lay in the rubble, his breath shallow, his body torn. The child he had saved knelt beside him, tears streaming down their face. "You kept your promise," the child whispered. Kyle gave a faint nod, his eyes closing. His blade still rested in his hand, glowing faintly in the firelight. "Commander." Rourke stood above the ruins, his voice heavy. "We held. That is enough." He knew the war was not over. The Keth would return, stronger than before. But the galaxy had seen what Earth's warriors could do. The enemy had bled. The survivors had lived. and the Legion had written their name in fire and blood. The last stand was not the end, it was only the beginning.